She was the quietest student in class, until one group project forced her to speak, and what she said made the entire school reevaluate everything they thought they knew about her. Maya Chen had perfected the art of invisibility by her junior year at Westfield High. She sat in the back corner of every classroom, spoke only when directly called upon, and had mastered the skill of blending into the background so completely that substitute teachers often marked her absent even when she was sitting right there. To her classmates, she was simply that quiet Asian girl, a convenient stereotype that allowed them to overlook her entirely. The truth was far more complicated. Maya wasn't shy by nature, she was strategic. At home, she spoke 3 languages fluently, managed her family's small restaurant's bookkeeping, tutored her younger brother in calculus, and translated legal documents for her immigrant neighbors. But at school, silence was survival. She'd learned early that drawing attention meant facing questions she couldn't answer without revealing family secrets that weren't hers to share. Her parents, David and Lynn Chen, had come to America 15 years ago with advanced degrees in engineering and literature, respectively, but their credentials weren't recognized. David now worked 60-hour weeks as a line cook, while Lynn cleaned office buildings at night. They'd sacrificed everything for Maya and her brother Tommy to have opportunities they'd never had, but the cost was crushing. The restaurant they'd scraped together enough money to buy 3 years ago was perpetually one bad month away from bankruptcy. Maya knew all of this because she managed the books, translated correspondence with suppliers, and helped her parents navigate the labyrinthine bureaucracy of small business ownership. At 17, she had more practical business experience than most MBA graduates, but none of it appeared on her transcript or college applications. How could she explain that her lack of extracurricular activities wasn't due to laziness, but because she spent every afternoon and weekend keeping her family's dreams alive? So she stayed invisible at school, focusing on maintaining her 4.2 GPA, while carefully avoiding any situation that might force her into the spotlight. It had worked perfectly for 3 years, until Mr. Rodriguez announced the group project that would change everything. "This semester's capstone project will be worth 40% of your grade," he announced to the Advanced Placement Economics class. "You'll be working in groups of 4 to develop a comprehensive business plan for addressing a real economic challenge in our community. The winning presentation will be forwarded to the State Economic Development Council and could potentially receive funding for implementation." Maya's stomach dropped. Group projects were her nightmare scenario. Too much visibility, too many questions about why she couldn't meet after school or participate in weekend study sessions. She began calculating whether she could afford to take the grade hit of working alone when Mr. Rodriguez continued. "I've already assigned the groups based on complementary skills and academic strengths. No changes will be permitted." He began reading names. Maya held her breath, hoping to be grouped with other high-achieving introverts who would be content to let her contribute research and writing from the background. Group 7, Maya Chen, Bradley Morrison, Jessica Torres, and Marcus Webb. Maya's heart sank. Bradley Morrison was student body president, captain of the debate team, and the kind of natural leader who commanded attention in every room he entered. Jessica Torres ran the school newspaper and had never met a question she wasn't eager to ask. Marcus Webb was class valedictorian and notorious for his perfectionist approach to everything. This was exactly the kind of high-profile, highly demanding group she'd spent 3 years avoiding. After class, the 4 of them gathered in the library to discuss the project. Bradley immediately took charge, pulling out his tablet and opening a new document. "Okay, so we need to identify an economic challenge and develop a viable business solution," he said. "I'm thinking we should focus on something high-impact but achievable, maybe downtown revitalization or youth unemployment." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "I love the downtown angle. I've done articles about the vacant storefronts and declining foot traffic. There's definitely data to support that as a significant economic challenge." Marcus was already pulling up demographic statistics on his laptop. "The youth unemployment rate in our county is 2.3% above the state average. That could be a compelling focus area, especially if we can demonstrate measurable outcomes." They looked expectantly at Maya, who had been silent throughout the exchange. She felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with unwanted attention. "I think those are both good ideas," she said quietly, hoping to deflect the conversation back to the others. "But what do you think would be the best approach?" Bradley pressed. "You're one of the strongest students in the class. You must have some opinions." Maya shifted uncomfortably. The truth was, she had very strong opinions about economic challenges facing their community, but they were informed by experiences she couldn't easily share. She'd seen firsthand how immigrant families struggled to access capital for small businesses, how language barriers prevented skilled workers from finding employment that matched their qualifications, how young people from working-class families were forced to choose between education and helping support their households. "Maybe we should do some more research first," she deflected. "Look at what resources are already available and where the gaps are." Over the next week, the group met several times. Maya contributed diligently, researching, fact-checking, and writing substantial portions of their preliminary report, but always from the background. She attended meetings, spoke when spoken to, and avoided sharing any insights that might reveal too much about her personal experience with the issues they were studying. The problem was that their project was struggling. Despite their collective academic achievements, they were producing work that was technically competent, but lacked genuine insight. Their proposals read like textbook exercises rather than solutions to real problems. Mr. Rodriguez had mentioned during check-ins that their preliminary work felt academically sound but disconnected from practical realities. 3 weeks into the project, Jessica voiced what they were all thinking. We're missing something. Our research is solid, our data is comprehensive, but it feels, I don't know, like we're writing about problems we've never actually experienced. Maybe that's because we haven't, Marcus said bluntly. We're all college-bound kids from middle-class families. What do we really know about economic hardship? Bradley frowned, clearly frustrated. So what are you suggesting? That we switch topics to something we have personal experience with? I'm suggesting that maybe we need to actually talk to people who are living with these challenges instead of just reading statistics about them, Jessica replied. That's a great idea, Maya said quietly, then immediately regretted speaking when all 3 pairs of eyes turned to her. I mean, primary research would strengthen our analysis. Do you know people we could interview? Bradley asked. You always seem to understand the assignment requirements better than the rest of us. Maya felt trapped. The honest answer was yes. She knew dozens of people struggling with exactly the economic challenges they were studying. She knew restaurant owners who worked 18-hour days but still couldn't make ends meet. She knew college graduates driving delivery trucks because their degrees weren't recognized. She knew families choosing between paying rent and paying for their children's textbooks. But admitting that meant revealing the carefully guarded truth about her own life. I might know some people, she said carefully. That would be amazing, Jessica said. We could set up interviews this weekend. I can't this weekend, Maya said quickly. I have family obligations. She saw the familiar look pass between her groupmates, the subtle eye roll that suggested they thought she was making excuses. It was the same look she'd been getting for 3 years whenever she couldn't participate in after-school activities or weekend study sessions. Okay, what about after school tomorrow? Bradley suggested. I can't do weekday afternoons either, Maya admitted, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Maya, Marcus said with barely concealed frustration, this is 40% of our grade. We need to put in the work if we want to succeed. I am putting in the work, Maya replied, her voice tighter than usual. I've written half our research report and compiled all the statistical analysis. But you're not participating in the collaborative aspects, Jessica pointed out. Group projects require actual group participation. Maya stared at them, feeling years of careful invisibility crumbling around her. These 3 accomplished, privileged students were lecturing her about work ethic and commitment, having no idea that she worked harder than any of them could imagine. They saw her reluctance to participate in their convenient scheduling and assumed laziness or lack of dedication. You think I'm not committed to this project? Maya asked, her voice still quiet but with an edge that made her groupmates look up from their notes. We're just saying that if you want to be part of the team, you need to actually be available to work with the team, Bradley said in the patronizing tone he usually reserved for underclassmen. Something inside Maya snapped. 3 years of swallowed words, of letting people underestimate her, of watching privileged classmates complain about problems that were minor inconveniences compared to what her family faced daily. She was tired of being invisible, tired of being judged by people who had no idea what real responsibility looked like. You want to know why I can't meet after school or on weekends? Maya said, her voice rising for the first time in 3 years. Because every day after school I work at my family's restaurant until midnight. Because every weekend I manage the bookkeeping, handle supplier negotiations, and translate legal documents. Because while you're all doing homework, I'm helping my parents, who both have advanced degrees, by the way, navigate a system that's designed to keep people like us struggling. Her groupmates stared at her in shock. Maya had never spoken more than a few sentences at a time in their presence, and now words were pouring out of her like water through a broken dam. You want to do primary research on economic challenges facing our community? I'll give you primary research. Do you know what it's like to watch your father, who has a master's degree in electrical engineering, work as a line cook because his credentials aren't recognized here? Do you know what it's like to see your mother, who taught literature at a university, clean office buildings at night because that's the only job she could get without perfect English? Jessica started to speak, but Maya continued, years of frustration finally finding voice. You want to understand small business challenges? I can tell you exactly why downtown businesses are failing. It's not just foot traffic or online competition. It's because immigrant business owners can't access traditional bank loans, so they're forced to take predatory high-interest loans that ensure they'll never get ahead. It's because licensing requirements are deliberately complicated and only published in English, creating artificial barriers for qualified entrepreneurs. Marcus was frantically taking notes now, realizing that Maya was providing insights they never could have found in their academic research. You want to know about youth unemployment? Try being a teenager whose parents need you to work to keep the family business afloat, so you can't take unpaid internships or participate in resume-building activities. Try being smart enough for AP classes, but unable to participate in study groups because you're needed at home. Try watching guidance counselors assume you're not college material because you don't have the same extracurricular profile as your classmates. Maya's voice was steady now, authoritative in a way none of them had ever heard before. She was no longer the quiet girl in the back corner. She was an expert speaking about a subject she knew better than any textbook could teach. The problem with your approach to this project is the same problem with most economic development initiatives, she continued. You're trying to solve problems from the outside, based on theory and statistics, instead of understanding them from the perspective of people who actually live them. Bradley leaned forward, completely captivated. So what would work better? Solutions that acknowledge the real barriers people face, Maya said. Instead of another job training program that unemployed people can't afford to attend, create programs that pay participants a living wage while they learn. Instead of loans that require perfect credit and extensive documentation, develop alternative lending criteria that account for different forms of financial stability. Instead of business development programs that assume entrepreneurs have spare time and transportation for workshops, she continued, create mobile support services that meet people where they are. Instead of one-size-fits-all solutions, recognize that economic challenges affect different communities in different ways. Jessica was recording everything on her phone now. Maya, this is incredible. You're describing systemic solutions that address root causes instead of just symptoms. Because I've seen what happens when well-meaning programs are designed by people who don't understand the communities they're trying to help, Maya replied. Good intentions aren't enough if the execution is based on faulty assumptions. Marcus looked up from his laptop. You know, everything you're describing, it sounds like you could design better programs yourself. Maya paused, considering this. Maybe I could. I've certainly seen what doesn't work. Over the next 2 hours, Maya transformed their entire project. Instead of a generic proposal for downtown revitalization, they developed a comprehensive plan for immigrant entrepreneur support services. Instead of theoretical solutions, they created practical programs based on Maya's detailed understanding of the real challenges facing working families. But the most significant transformation was in Maya herself. For the first time in 3 years, her classmates were seeing her not as the quiet Asian girl who did her work and stayed out of the way, but as a brilliant strategist with insights they couldn't match. Maya, Bradley said as they wrapped up the session, I have to ask, why didn't you ever speak up before? You clearly have more practical knowledge about economics than any of us. Maya considered the question. Because speaking up meant explaining why I knew what I knew. And explaining that meant admitting that my life doesn't look like yours. It meant risking judgment or pity or people treating me differently. But you're treating yourself differently now, Jessica observed. What changed? I got tired of letting other people's assumptions limit what I could contribute, Maya said simply. And I realized that staying invisible doesn't protect anyone, it just wastes opportunities. 3 weeks later, their group presented their Immigrant Entrepreneur Support Initiative to a panel of judges that included Mr. Rodriguez, the school principal, and 2 members of the State Economic Development Council. Maya, who had never spoken publicly in school before, delivered the opening presentation with confidence and authority that left the audience stunned. She outlined the systematic barriers facing immigrant entrepreneurs, presented their mobile support services model, and demonstrated the economic impact their program could have on the entire community. When the judges asked technical questions about implementation, Maya answered with the expertise of someone who had lived every challenge they were addressing. The presentation lasted 30 minutes. Maya spoke for 25 of them. They won first place unanimously. But the real victory came afterward, when word of Maya's presentation spread throughout the school. Students who had never noticed her before began approaching her for advice on their own projects. Teachers started calling on her more frequently, recognizing that her quiet demeanor had been hiding remarkable insight. College counselors began discussing advanced placement and scholarship opportunities they'd never mentioned before. I can't believe we never knew how smart you were, one classmate said to her after their economics class. I was always this smart, Maya replied. You just weren't paying attention. The State Economic Development Council awarded their group $25,000 in seed funding to pilot their immigrant entrepreneur program. Maya was invited to serve on the implementation committee, a position that would look impressive on college applications, but, more importantly, would allow her to help other families facing the same struggles hers had endured. 6 months later, Maya stood at the podium during graduation rehearsal, having been selected as the student speaker for commencement. As she looked out at her classmates, many of whom were seeing her as a leader for the first time, she thought about the quiet girl who had sat in the back corner for 3 years, afraid to let anyone see who she really was. She had learned that invisibility felt like safety, but it was actually a prison. That staying quiet to avoid judgment meant missing opportunities to make a difference. That the very experiences she'd been ashamed to share were actually her greatest strengths. Some of you might be surprised to see me up here, she began her speech, earning nervous laughter from classmates who remembered her years of silence. For most of high school, I was the quiet girl in the back of the room. I thought invisibility was protection. I thought if people didn't really see me, they couldn't judge me or limit me. She paused, looking out at faces that were finally paying attention. But I learned something important this year. When we hide who we are to avoid judgment, we also hide what we have to offer. Our struggles aren't shameful secrets to be hidden. They're sources of strength and wisdom that the world needs. Every single person in this graduating class has experienced something that gives them unique insight into how the world works and how it could work better. The question isn't whether you're smart enough or qualified enough to make a difference. The question is whether you're brave enough to let people see who you really are. Maya looked directly at her economics groupmates, who were beaming with pride in the third row. Sometimes the quietest person in the room has the most important things to say, but you'll never know unless you create space for them to speak, and unless they're willing to risk being seen. As applause filled the auditorium, Maya realized that finding her voice hadn't just changed how others saw her. It had changed how she saw herself. She was no longer the invisible girl hiding in the background of her own life. She was Maya Chen, economist, entrepreneur, advocate, and leader. She was exactly who she'd always been, finally willing to let the world see it. And that, she understood now, had made all the difference.